what I want to do is, in my bag, always just have a packet of tomatoes. So at any given point in time, I could just throw them at people, because I think we've lost the art of shaming people, particularly when it comes to black women and gay men. I find that black men are the harshest critics, but the quietest defenders. Good morrow, guys and girls. Welcome. Or you know what? Good evening, good afternoon. I don't know when you're listening or watching this podcast, but welcome back to It's That Deep, the podcast. Doing a bit of a shoulder shake if you can't see, but I'm your host. My name is Faye Shara, and this is a podcast where everything is that deep. Nothing is not deep over here. I'm sorry. We are deep thinkers. We have the hard conversations. We dig a bit into what everything means over here, whether that is politics or pop culture or social media or reality TV. It really doesn't matter. There's a deeper meaning to everything, and we talk about that here. Of course, we have a bit of fun too, because that's very important. But welcome to episode 29 of the pod. We're hitting the big 3-0 very, very soon. Excited about that. And yeah, I'm just really looking forward to getting into today's episode. At present, I'm shivering in my home that the Lord has provided for me. I'm wearing a fleece in September. I thought we were going to have an Indian summer. We've had nothing of the sort. It's actually raining outside as I speak. So for all of you who are like, yeah, I love autumn, I just love the rain hitting the leaves on the trees, I love winter, what's going on? Can we talk? Can you lot come around the corner? Because I literally detest this weather. The only good thing about this season is Christmas. So if we could fast forward to Christmas, that would be great. But yeah, let me know how you guys are. We are crossing over into October. Oh, Nigerian independence is coming up. Whoop whoop, shouts, cheers. But then also like the last quarter of the year. That's crazy already that we're here. Almost 2025. Even crazier. But yeah, let me know how you guys are. Let me know what you guys are enjoying, not enjoying with the pod. I was literally in the shower this morning and I was thinking about something I want to introduce but will come probably way later, which is, should I say it or should I just drop it? Let me just drop it. But it's a new thing that I want to introduce and I think could be quite fun. But anyways, I've said enough. I think we should get into the first honourable pick. And as I now sit and reflect, I feel like all of my stories today somewhat revolve around men. I'm really like, that's my least favourite topic. I'm so sorry, not sure how it happened, but we're going to talk about men all episode long. So yeah, let's jump in. Okay, so we're starting off on a really sober note, and it's funny because I write my scripts for the pod, but like still sometimes it's very hard to make sense or articulate what it is I feel or what I want to say when it comes to particular things. This story is one of those, so I'm sure everyone has had a whiff of it at some point this week, but we're going to talk about the story of Marcellus Williams. And this was, if you don't know, a man who this week in Missouri was executed by lethal injection after being in prison for 23 years. So like basically my whole life, because he was accused of first degree murder that took place during a burglary in like, I think it was 1998. And this week he was killed by the government, which is still a crazy, you know, statement. Like the government can just kill people, but you know, executions happen all the time in America and they happen across many states. But I think what made this story so significant to so many people was the red flags and the inconsistencies that were so evident throughout the entire case. But when I say red flags, I mean like big flashing lights, red neon flags twerking in your face. Like that's the level of holes that were in this case. Like from evidence to the prosecution to the outcome, from the point of evidence, like it's clear for anybody who's read up on the case that the prints found on the murder weapon were not his. There was no trace of his fingerprint on the murder weapon, but we know that the weapon has the capacity to carry prints because the the forensic staff who handled the weapon, obviously after the crime, their prints are all over it, but his are not, and he's supposed to have been the murderer. Then there's things like, hair found at the DNA, nail, dirt, whatever, blood found at the crime. None of it matches his. So it's almost as if he was not there. Maybe because he didn't murder this lady. There's been calls even from the family who are like, the family of the victim. I mean, they're like, we don't think he did this. We think our daughter's murderer is still out there. So all of that has become irrelevant, right? And then we move even further into the trial, where even if there was evidence that suggested that he was present at the scene or he was the murderer, he never stood a chance, because when we get to the actual case and actual prosecution, they fought really hard to make sure this guy has an all-white jury. Now, they didn't succeed, but out of 12 jurors, 11 were white and 1 was black. And so even, like I said, if there was evidence that he did do this thing, he was not going to survive that court case, because they are in Missouri, not really the deep South, but culturally very aligned to the values of the South. And so, yeah, it was all over for him, Jackie. And so at every point, even though there's so much evidence to suggest otherwise, at every point, his conviction for first-degree murder has been overturned. And I'm talking the governor of Missouri, the Supreme Court of Missouri, and the Supreme Court of the United States. I think it went up to the Supreme Court in the last few weeks, and they literally overturned it. There's been conspiracy theories about why. I think it's because the money they would owe this guy after keeping him in prison for 23 years, that bill would be too big to cash, and they were not ready to set that precedent. However, what we have to say, and the themes that come from this case, I mean, initially we could talk about the death sentence, and I'm like, not really interested in that. A, because I'm in Britain and we don't have the death sentence anymore. And also, I'll be real, I don't know how I feel about a death sentence. Some of you deserve to die. Not you guys, but you know what I mean. Like, some people, when I read some stories, and sometimes you just go on those TikTok scrolls and you hear some of the things that I watched one last night. I'm like, yeah, you deserve to die. So I don't know if I'm for or against the death sentence. I have to be completely honest. But I think there is a bigger conversation in here, and one that applies whether you live in a country with or without the death sentence. And that for me is it ever really possible for us to enact our work or fulfill our jobs without bias? The factor that contributed the most to his execution was racism. Plain and simple. Like, if you take out racism, we have an innocent man who goes free, right? But obviously that didn't happen, and that's because of the choices and the decisions that were made by people along the entire trial. And I say people because obviously inanimate objects can't be racist. Like, it's living and breathing people who are racist. And I think, like, for me, the thing I've been thinking about is, particularly with industries like, the courts, the police, I'm going to throw healthcare and like teaching in there. These sort of industries that are very, very people focused. I believe they are called public servants. I do think they all fall under that umbrella. Like, particularly with those sorts of jobs, like, how do we guarantee that their work won't be tainted by biases and prejudices that they hold? I want to, at this point, make very clear that we all have biases and prejudices, and I'm not actually just talking about white people. I'm talking about all of us in general. We all have these things, whether good or bad. I guess that's up for debate, because they're natural, right, based on how you were raised. But my question is just like, these are supposed to be really fair institutions. They are for the people, and they're supposed to, whether it's administer justice, whether it's to administer punishment in the case of the police, whether it's to raise children and to teach them, or to administer healthcare, in the examples that I gave, they are supposed to do that on like a clean slate, and they are supposed to operate and treat everybody the same. But is there a way for us to really guarantee that? If my man is 35 years old and he's been raised in the deep South, and naturally there's a way and a thought process he has towards a particular race or a particular religion There's no way you can tell this guy, no matter how hard you tell him, to treat everyone fair and treat everyone equal and make sure you follow the code of conduct for lawyers. No matter how hard you even punish him for it, that's a lot of unlearning to do. And so I just wonder, how do we function as a society? How do these particular institutions function and thrive, and how can they be effective when they are made up by people who are flawed, people who have biases, who have prejudices, who are led by those biases? How does it happen? It's all great in theory, but in practice, people make up the institutions that serve other people. And if those people are flawed, then that's all going to spill out, and then it's just a revolving door. And so that's all the thought process that went on in my mind. It's just a real shame that, I mean, you know, that was an unnecessary loss of life for sure. I mean, yeah, there's really nothing more to be said than that. It's just really, really sad and really upsetting. I saw a lot of people rally around him on social media, and a lot of people attempt to get this thing overturned. But of course, that's not what happened. And such big outcomes like that can be so easily avoided if we all just took some time to like do some introspection and have the hard conversations with ourselves and be honest with ourselves, because people don't want to be honest about their prejudices. And really, that's where everything starts. But those are my thoughts. Somber note to start, right? But let's move on, because I have some flogging to do. Okay, so like I said, for some weird reason, we're talking about men this whole week. But like I said, this honorable pick is no different. It's just with deep regret that I have to talk about Phillip Schofield. If you remember who he is, little Philly who likes to touch little kids. That's not funny. I shouldn't make a joke about that. But he does like to touch kids. Phillip Schofield, if who you remember, was on ITV. He was on This Morning. And after a whole scandal last year where he was caught to be grooming a young lad on the show, he left TV. But this week, with the utmost regret, he came back to announce that he is making his return to television. A mere 16 months, by the way. Let me tell you what white privilege is. A mere 16 months after he got kicked off ITV, he's back on telly. Not on ITV, he's on Channel 5, but he's back on us. Do you know that's maternity leave, by the way? I'm sure there's people who have had a longer maternity leave than Phillip Schofield's break from TV. But anywho, I digress. So he's back to our screens on Channel 5, and he's starring in a show called Castaway, which is like a budget I'm a Celeb. The only difference is it's not multiple celebrities, it's one, aka him. And as he described it on his social media, there is no water, no food, and no crew. It's literally him and a camera. And guys, I actually watched the trailer, and I would like those 30 seconds of my life back. You know, it was a pile of dog poo. And in the trailer, he's talking about how, like, this is my time to tell my side of the story. You know what he said? You know what he said, guys? This is the biggest thing that made me laugh. He said, I know what I did was unwise, but is it enough to destroy someone? It's all very victim-y. It's all very woe is me. And I think it's very obvious that this is the angle that he is using to facilitate his comeback into mainstream television. And I just think it's an absolute joke. I want to, Phillip Schofield, I mean, there's probably no chance that you're listening to this, but I want you to remind you, uncle, that you are not the victim here. You are a nonce. And we actually don't need to hear your side of the story. I'm not sure who lied to you. In the words of Tiffany Pollard, I'm not sure who told you were fly. I'm not sure who told you you were hot. I'm not sure who told you were sexy, but you're nothing of the sort. You are a nonce. You do like children. And there's nothing good that can come of us hearing your side of the story. We do not care. I think that leads me to my wider point, which is like, we are now in a dangerous place as a society where everybody feels that they should, or if they feel an entitlement to telling their side of their story or having their voice heard. And I know that sounds super controversial because everybody wants to be seen and heard, right? But I'm going to just go on record here and say some of you do not need to be seen. Some of you do not need to be heard. Some of you do not need to tell your side of the story. And I'm not even sorry about that. And it's a post-millennium thing, I think, as well, with the rise of like social media and digital media and blah, 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 blah. There's so many avenues through which people can tell their stories and through which your voices can be heard. And notice I said your voices can be heard, right? Because it wasn't that people didn't have voices before. It was that their voices weren't being heard. Like, if you weren't a part of the fabric of traditional media back in even the 80s, 60s, right? You had a voice. Your voice just wasn't heard, right? But now we swung way too far. And it's like everyone has multiple voices that they want everyone else to listen to. So where like back then, if we didn't want to hear from you, we just didn't hear from you. You weren't given a TV show. Your stuff wasn't commissioned. You know, you weren't given a slot on radio. You weren't given an article in a newspaper. You were blocked from having access to having your voice heard. But now we're in a digital age. And so I can pick this up and you can hear my voice and you can hear everything I have to say. And that's a good and a bad thing. Of course, it gives people who have been excluded from other conversations the ability to be heard. But it also gives people who really don't deserve that right the freedom and like the easy access to rehabilitate their public images after scandal. Like I saw something about Dutch the other day back on Instagram talking about like, we don't care what you have to say, uncle. You are a nonce. You need to be locked away. And it's a hard balancing act. It's a hard balance to strike. But I think it's really important for us to shame people. We should bring back shaming, you know. Oh my God. What I want to do is in my bag, always just have a packet of tomatoes. So at any given point in time, I could just throw them at people, because I think we've lost the art of shaming people. And we've lost the art of telling people that they're not as important as they believe they are. Phillip Schofield is not as important as he believes he is. His voice is not important. And I'm talking about digital media, but I mean, the truth here is that this was a national broadcaster who commissioned this series, so they deserve their own flogging. But even in the case that Channel 5 never commissioned this, they never picked this up, I'm sure he would have found a way to tell his story, right? Again, because he has a phone, he has access to a phone the same way we all do. And so what am I getting at here? I'm just getting at the fact that I think the lifespan of a scandal is massively affected by the fact that we are now all technically owners of the media, and we can now create our own narratives, and we can now change the story and change the focus in a way that we couldn't before. And that for me is dangerous, because, and I'm not somebody who's like, yo, we need to hold grudges and we need to nail people to the cross 10 times, right? I'm not of that. I don't believe that we should do that. But I do think it's dangerous, because it means that people can so easily spin. That's where spin came from, innit? Like, people can so easily spin narratives and draw attention away from, you know, their real life actions, which deserve real life consequences. Because first of all, being cancelled is not a thing. I don't believe cancel culture exists, as much as people try and tell you it does. Number one. Number two, I'm sorry, but online consequences are not the same as offline consequences. And it's kind of what I've been saying about like DLT Malta and shits and gigs as well. Like, online outrage really does not mean anything. It has no currency until we match that energy offline. And so where I'm saying like it's dangerous for people to have the privilege of their voice being heard, it's because realistically they're able to spin things in a way that allows them to avoid consequences, real life consequences of their actions. And so I have nothing good to say about Phillip Schofield. I wish him the very worst in life. And I really hope, you know, and pray that anyone else who he touched, you know, gets is protected, is shielded, is guarded in this time that he's trying to make his comeback to the limelight. I hope they have a good set of people around them, and we can all just hope for the best, except for Phillip Schofield. Okay, I set up for this one because it's a serious one, and I think I have more regret actually than I did talking about Phillip Schofield, and that's because I'm talking about Diddy. And it's so annoying because as I say his name, his image flashes in my mind, and I just recoil in disgust and want to scratch my eyeballs out, because what a terrible story. What depths of depravity and sinfulness. It's yuck, all of it. I hate it all. But last week he was arrested for a few things. He's in prison. He tried to post bail twice. They rejected that twice. Oh, love it, chef's kiss. But the fallout from everything has happened over the last few days, and that's what I want to talk about. But I want to make clear what he was actually charged for, because I think that in itself is also important. So he's been charged for racketeering, conspiracy, sex trafficking by force, and transportation for purposes of prostitution. So not rape, not domestic violence, not grooming. It's those other things, not that those are any less unimportant. That English doesn't make sense. But anyways, I find it interesting that he wasn't or hasn't yet been charged on any of those things. It's like racketeering and basically sex trafficking. And this, Omar, where do we even begin with this one, Sha? This has so many layers, so many levels to it. First of all, I don't think it's done. I don't think everything is fully uncovered. Now listen, I might at this point insert a clip where I said at the start of the year, by way of the Lord, my God, that this is a year of exposure. This really is a year that people are being exposed. And I want to just also make a point here that exposure is not always a bad thing. It's only a bad thing if you have something to hide. But I say that on all levels. Like, the Lord is exposing stuff to me about me. Things are happening in church settings. Things are happening in media and entertainment. Things are happening in the music industry. Exposure has been happening all this year. And I kept saying to my sister, I need to go back and watch the Cat Williams interview with Shannon Not So Sharp, because I just feel like there's more in there that we missed. But yeah, the point I'm getting at is this Diddy thing is like the tip of the iceberg. I feel like there's more to come. And it really irks me and kind of makes me feel a bit sick to talk about all of his depravity. So I want to instead, because I'm a bit of a wuss, just extract some of the things that I have been seeing, and some of the themes and some of the issues around the case that we can talk about, because I don't really want to talk about the case. It makes me feel a bit sick. So first things first, and I really I hate to make it a race thing, but you can't take black people nowhere. You can't take ninjas nowhere. We, for our lives, cannot just be serious people. And actually, I'm going to rewrite that statement, and I want to point this towards the men. I tweeted this, and in the words of Nene Leakes, I said what I said. And I maintain that stance even till today, because I don't understand why, in light of all of these allegations, all of these conspiracy theories, all of these claims and statements that are being written, all of the articles that are coming out, I can't understand why you would put all of your two brain cells together to create a skit or a meme or a funny video about the Diddy case and about the 1,000 bottles of baby oil. I'm referencing one creator in particular, but there have been so many. I literally cannot count it. A crop from the US to Nigeria to Ghana to the UK. I don't understand why we can't be serious people. I don't understand why, sorry, I'm going to generalize here, but I don't understand why, okay, no, I won't generalize. Some black men must trivialize everything. Everything must be a joke. Everything must be banned. Oh, that's so funny. Must everything be a joke? And that's, again, that's part of why I call this thing It's That Deep, because I don't think there's anything funny about the FBI seizing thousands of bottles of baby oil from Diddy's home, laced with drugs, which he would use to cream the bodies of women and drug them so he could commit crimes. Like, what about that could be funny? No, let's wait. What about that do you read and you say, oh my god, that is hilarious, I've got to make a skit making light of this? Like, there is no world in which that's normal. And I think there is a real, and this is regardless of like geographical boundary, I think there's a real what's the word I'm trying to look for? I think some black men are stunted growth wise. I think mentally a lot of them are stuck in like the class clown, high school joker boy era. And I'm being careful with my words here because I also appreciate that black men, you know, don't have the easiest time, and I understand that laughter is an important outlet for them. However, I struggle. I'm gonna be so honest, I struggle because I just don't understand why you haven't grown up. Why are you still stuck in 14, making stupid jokes? Why is everything a joke? Why, when your community needs you, and this community I'm speaking of is black women, I will get onto why, it all adds up, but we'll get onto why that community is black women. But why, when they need you to double down on Diddy and, you know, be really, really stern and say, look, yo, this is not right, he needs to be dealt with, he needs to piss in prison, whatever. Like, why, when that is what is required of you from your community, you've gone the complete opposite way and you sat and you've written a dead script for a dead skit that's got 100,000 views on Twitter? Like, is it really worth it? Where at what point do we, I'm not articulating this point so well, but like, at what point do we just become serious and do we switch on and off the hats? Because like, I feel like I do it here where like I have a joke, I have a kiki, but when it's time to talk about something serious, like, can we just grow up for a moment? It's not by force, everything must be laughter, like, I'm sorry. That's statement number one. Statement number two, and it kind of feeds into the first point, is, and I've known this and I feel like we all know this, but the black community has a really bad problem with homophobia. And again, tying into my first point, but like, I find it interesting that a lot of the skits have a homophobic tinge to them, and a lot of the jokes and a lot of the banter that have come out have that very slight homophobic tinge to them. And I guess it's a shock to a lot of people that Diddy is either bisexual. Well, yeah, we're gonna call him bisexual. It's a shock to me too, because obviously last year Cassie's case came out, her civil suit came out, but obviously she is a woman, a very attractive woman, so like, as much as what he did was horrendous, it's like he did it with a woman, right? But then Rodney Jones came out with a really long lawsuit, which I can't remember if I wrapped it at the end of last year, but he came out with a really long lawsuit of all of the things Diddy would make him do, and him being drugged by Diddy and being abused by Diddy and him being groomed by Diddy. And now more stuff is coming out about Justin Bieber and Meek Mill and all these other rappers, and it's like, instead of us, I'm so sorry again, but when I say us, I mean black men, to really be outraged, and I feel like I'm contradicting myself because of what I previously said about online outrage, but instead of us to be outraged and be incensed by this guy and his like network of grooming, we're all like, well, I say we again, black men are all so focused on like, oh my god, he's gay, oh my god, does he swing that way? Like, in the grand scheme of things, and I know homosexuality is a very, very, you get varied stances on it, right? And I'm not actually here to give my stance on homosexuality, but in the grand scheme of things, when we're talking about the depths of depravity that we're talking about when it comes to Diddy, is that what is important? I should think not, and I would hope not. But again, that's what I go back to. I don't know how this turned into a pick about black men, and I promise I'm not here to like pee on black men. I'm really not. But, you know, I think accountability is important, and I think the main perpetrators of multiple things, the main people who allow predators like Diddy to persist are other black men. The main people who do not defend the victims of people like Diddy are black men. And so that's why this is sort of kind of turned into a pick about black men. But I want to make it clear that I do not hate black men, just in case you didn't know. I actually love black men. But I think it's important to be accountable. If you look really closely at any sort of event, again, I've referenced Shits and Gigs, but again, a lot of their defenders were black men. Bill Cosby, a lot of his defenders were black men. Even in Diddy's case, I've seen he's not a comedian, but like people like Faison Love, you know, coming at me like, oh, is it a crime to just be a bit freaky? Is it a crime to just like sex? And it's like, we're not talking about somebody who just likes sex. We're talking about somebody who is morally depraved and is an abuser. And so particularly when it comes to black women and gay men, I find that black men are the harshest critics, but the quietest defenders. They do not say anything, and that is because they let their misogyny and they let their homophobia overrule what is just real basic moral standards, like maybe don't drug somebody and rape them without their consent. I don't know, but that's a theme that I'm seeing here from story to story to story to story. And like, even when we look at Diddy's history and how he's been able to get away with this for so long, he's only one person, so that means he's now had a body of people protecting him, and the likelihood of that body of people being people who look like him is very high. But also the likelihood of that body of people having no regard for his victims because of who they are is also very, very strong. So, and when I say black men, I mean some. So if I don't say some, please insert the word some. So some black men have no regard for gay black men. Some black men have no regard for black women. And so their defense of Diddy makes it all the more easier because they're not losing out on anything by defending a class of people who are already majorly defenseless in society. I hope it makes sense. But yeah, like I said, this was one of those things where I'm struggling to articulate or even really know what I think, because there's so much in this Diddy case. And it's like I said, we're just at the tip of the iceberg. We don't even know what's going to come out. But I think for me, the main thing that is flashing in my mind and has been, you know, something that I've been seeing more and more and more in my personal life, more and more in my local space, in my national space, and then definitely always globally, is this idea that, like, I'm sorry, but black men do not always protect black women. And I'm speaking obviously as a black woman. I'm not a black gay man, so I can't speak to that, but I can speak to what I observe. And I would say the same applies to that class of people. If you can't tell, I'm struggling to articulate and struggling to put my words out into the world because I just can't, like, it's just much. It's really much. And I don't know if I want to read any of the stuff around it anymore because it's sickening. But yeah, that is my main story. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know, what are you thinking? What have you read about the Diddy case? I started going down the conspiracy rabbit hole and I just said, I've got to guard myself. I ain't doing this right now. So if you've done that and you want to share with me, please do it. But yeah, that is episode 29 of It's That Deep. I feel like I'm back in my flow. Can't lie, lads. I feel like we're back. We back, honey. And yeah, thank you so much for listening, and we'll be back next week for another episode. Don't forget to follow, like, subscribe, comment, blah 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 blah, all of the things. And I will see you next week for episode 30. We're crossing over into millennialhood.